Royal Guard breaks protocol for a little girl with cancer, and the moment was truly heartwarming. It was a beautiful afternoon when Emily arrived at the palace gates, her small wheelchair gently pushed by her mother. The sun was beginning to set, casting a soft golden glow across the large, magnificent grounds. The royal palace stood proudly in the background, its towering walls reflecting the grandeur of the monarchy it represented. Today was a special day, one Emily had dreamt of for years. A day that had been granted to her through a special charity designed to fulfill the wishes of children with life-threatening illnesses. Her wish, like many others, was to meet the royal family, to see the magnificent palace, and most of all, to be part of something that felt so far removed from her battle with cancer. Emily had spent most of her young life in hospitals, surrounded by doctors, treatments, and endless days in a sterile room. She had learned about the harsh realities of life at an early age, but despite everything, her spirit remained bright. Her mother always told her that kindness was the most powerful thing in the world. No matter how difficult things get, her mother would say, always remember that kindness will always find a way to shine through. It was a lesson Emily held close to her heart, a lesson that helped her face each difficult day with courage. Today, however, felt different. Emily's heart raced with excitement as they approached the grand entrance. The guards, standing in their stiff ceremonial uniforms, were a sight to behold. The tall, imposing figures were perfectly still, their faces blank, their eyes trained straight ahead. Emily had heard about them. These royal guards were known for their unwavering discipline and the ability to stand perfectly still for hours without moving a muscle. She had always been fascinated by them. To her, they were like statues, immovable, unflinching. Her mother smiled softly as she noticed Emily's curious gaze. "Would you like to meet one of them?" she asked, gently nudging her daughter. Emily nodded enthusiastically, her eyes fixed on the nearest guard, Officer James. He stood tall and proud, as he had done every day of his career. He had been assigned to this post for years, and for him, it was just another day in his long career of guarding the palace. He had learned to block out the noise of the world around him, to focus solely on his duty. The rules were clear: no movement, no talking, no distractions. His role was to maintain a sense of order and protection, a symbol of the royal family's authority and power. He did this with dedication, discipline, and, above all, silence. But as Emily drew closer, something about this moment felt different. She was just a child, frail and small, sitting in her wheelchair, yet her presence seemed to carry a special weight. Officer James noticed her before she even reached him. Her bright eyes, wide with awe and wonder, met his gaze. She was fascinated by the guard's uniform, the gleaming buttons, the tall, impressive hat perched atop his head. She had heard stories about the royal guards, about how they were always serious, never smiling, and never breaking their strict protocol. But here she was, in the presence of one of them. As Emily's wheelchair drew closer, Officer James felt an unexpected warmth spread through him. He had been trained to ignore the world around him, to remain impervious to emotions or distractions. But in that moment, as he locked eyes with Emily, something stirred deep inside him. There was something about her that made him pause, even if only for a moment. Her gaze was full of wonder, and there was a sense of innocence in her that he had not seen in a long time. Emily's heart raced, and she couldn't help but feel nervous. She had always admired the guards from afar, but now that she was so close, she wasn't sure what to do. She had a question, one that had been on her mind since she first learned about the royal guards. She wanted to ask him something, but her voice faltered. She had always been a shy child, and now, in front of this imposing figure, she felt small. She shifted nervously in her wheelchair, unsure whether she was allowed to speak to him. Her mother, sensing her hesitation, gently leaned down to her daughter's ear. "Emily, do you want to ask him something?" "It's okay to speak to him," she whispered. Emily looked up at her mother, and then back at Officer James. He was so tall, so composed, standing there like a statue. But there was something in his eyes, a warmth, a kindness that made her feel safe. She took a deep breath and gathered all the courage she had. "Can you smile for me?" she asked softly, barely above a whisper. For a moment, Officer James was still. He heard her words, and the crowd around them seemed to fade away. The usual rules of conduct, the protocols he had lived by for so many years, were suddenly at the forefront of his mind. The guidelines were clear: he could not speak, he could not show any emotion, and he certainly could not break protocol. It was a simple task, but in his world, a smile was not just a gesture, it was a break from the rigidity of his training. But as he looked down at Emily, sitting in her wheelchair with a hopeful look on her face, something shifted. He saw the fragility in her. He could see the courage it took for her to ask for something so simple, something that seemed so small yet so important to her. His heart swelled, and for the first time in years, he realized that perhaps breaking protocol, just for this moment, was the right thing to do. Slowly, he allowed his expression to soften. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He smiled, a small but genuine smile. It wasn't the smile of a royal guard, but the smile of a human being. A smile that reached his eyes and warmed his heart. The crowd around them fell silent. Everyone had been watching, waiting for Officer James to remain as stoic as ever. But instead, they witnessed something rare, something beautiful, a moment of connection between two people from different worlds. Emily's face lit up in response, her eyes sparkling with joy. She had made her wish come true, not through grand gestures or extraordinary circumstances, but simply through the kindness of a man who saw her. Her mother, standing nearby, felt a lump rise in her throat. She had been overwhelmed with emotion throughout the day, but seeing the genuine smile of a royal guard, one of the most disciplined men she had ever seen, directed toward her daughter, filled her with a profound sense of gratitude. She could not hold back the tears that welled up in her eyes. It was a moment she would never forget, one that would stay with her daughter for the rest of her life. A simple act of kindness, a gesture that spoke louder than any words, would forever be etched in Emily's memory. The moment passed quickly, but it left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. For Emily, it was more than just meeting a royal guard, it was a reminder that kindness could be found in the most unexpected places, even in the most disciplined and unlikely of individuals. And for Officer James, it was a reminder that sometimes, in the midst of all the rules and protocols, it was important to remember the humanity that bound them all together. As Emily and her mother continued their tour of the palace, the smile that Officer James had given her remained in her heart. It was the memory of a guard who had broken protocol, not out of rebellion, but out of a simple act of kindness, a reminder that even in the most rigid systems, a little warmth and humanity could make all the difference. The afternoon sun bathed the palace in a warm glow as Emily was wheeled deeper into the grand courtyard. The palace walls loomed tall, their intricate design a symbol of the royal family's long history. Every corner of the palace seemed to sparkle with life, as if it was holding secrets and stories that only the few who had been inside could ever understand. Emily's heart raced with excitement. She had seen pictures of the palace before, but now, standing at the gates, everything felt even grander than she had imagined. She glanced up at her mother, who was smiling softly. Emily's mother had been her rock through everything: the treatments, the hospital visits, the days filled with uncertainty. Today, however, seemed to be a break from the normal struggles. Today was supposed to be filled with magic, and Emily intended to make the most of it. She had dreamed of a moment like this for as long as she could remember, and now that it was happening, it was almost too good to be true. As they passed through the tall, iron gates, the palace guards stood in their usual spots, like statues. Their uniforms were immaculate, the bright red and black contrasting sharply with the white stone walls of the palace. Emily's eyes were wide with wonder. She had read about the royal guards, but now she was up close, surrounded by their unyielding presence. Their job was simple, yet complex: stand tall, be silent, and protect the royal family. Their discipline was legendary. But as they moved closer to one of the guards, Emily's attention was immediately drawn to Officer James. She had noticed him earlier, standing tall and stoic by the gates. His face, however, was not like the others. It was soft, though firm, with a depth that made Emily wonder what he might be thinking. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something about him felt approachable. He didn't look as distant as the other guards. It was as if he understood, somehow, that today was different. Her mother noticed where Emily was looking and smiled. "Do you want to meet one of the guards, honey?" she asked, her voice soft and warm. Emily nodded eagerly. It had been her dream to meet one of the royal guards. She had read about them in books, seen them on TV, and even heard stories from her mother about their strict training and their unshakable sense of duty. But she never imagined she would actually be able to stand in front of one, let alone speak to him. They slowly wheeled Emily closer to Officer James. As they approached, her excitement began to grow. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. Her hands, which had always been so calm and steady, now trembled slightly as they rested on the armrests of her wheelchair. She felt small, vulnerable, and yet, for some reason, excited. Officer James stood tall, his hands clasped tightly in front of him, his posture perfect. He had seen hundreds of people pass by the gates before, but there was something different about Emily. Perhaps it was her young age, her small frame, or the way she gazed at him with such curiosity and wonder. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Officer James felt something stir deep inside him. He had trained for years to remain unmoved by the world around him, but in Emily's eyes, there was something raw, something real, that made him pause. Emily wanted to say something, but she didn't know where to begin. Her mouth felt dry, and for the first time that day, she felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. She had faced so much in her life: the endless hospital visits, the treatments, the pain, but speaking to a royal guard was something else entirely. What if he didn't notice her? What if he didn't care? Her mother saw the hesitation in Emily's eyes and gently spoke up. "It's okay, Emily. You can say something to him," she encouraged, her voice filled with warmth. "He's here for you today, remember. You're allowed to speak to him." Emily took a deep breath, gathering her courage. She had to speak, even if her voice shook. Slowly, she turned her head toward Officer James and asked, "Can you smile for me?" Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but there was a sincerity behind it that reached Officer James. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The other guards remained still, their eyes forward, unmoving. The crowd around them held their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Emily waited anxiously for a response, her fingers gripping the arms of her wheelchair. Officer James, as always, remained perfectly still. But his mind raced. His entire training had taught him to remain unflinching, to stand like a statue, and to never break protocol. Yet, as he looked down at Emily, something inside him softened. He saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the trust she had placed in him with just one simple request. She wasn't asking for a grand gesture or anything beyond what was within his control. She only wanted to see a smile. A small part of him wanted to refuse. He had followed orders his entire career, and breaking protocol, even for a moment, felt like a betrayal to everything he had learned. But then, as he gazed at Emily once more, he realized that this moment was not about rules or discipline. It was about kindness, and kindness was something that transcended any rule book. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Officer James allowed the corners of his mouth to lift. It wasn't a wide grin, nor was it a forced smile. It was a small, genuine smile, one that spoke of understanding, compassion, and the connection he felt in that fleeting moment. It was the kind of smile that spoke louder than words. Emily's face lit up in response. She had been waiting for that smile, and now that she saw it, her heart soared. Her eyes sparkled with joy, and for the first time that day, she felt truly seen. It wasn't just the royal palace or the grand architecture that made this day special, it was this moment, this exchange of kindness between two strangers. Emily had asked for something simple, but in return, she had received something much more meaningful, a reminder that even in the most disciplined of environments, human connection could still thrive. The people around them gasped softly, surprised by the unexpected act of warmth. It was rare for anyone to break the stoic silence of the royal guard, but today, Officer James had done just that. The crowd stood in awe, witnessing the powerful effect of a simple smile. Emily's mother wiped away a tear as she watched the exchange, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had hoped this day would be special for Emily, but she never could have imagined that it would be marked by such a profound moment of kindness. The smile, though brief, would stay with Emily for the rest of her life. It was more than just a friendly gesture, it was a powerful reminder that, despite the hardships she faced, kindness could still make a difference. It would fuel her strength as she continued her fight against cancer, and it would stay with her as a beacon of hope. As the moment passed and Emily was gently wheeled further into the courtyard, she couldn't stop smiling. She had met a royal guard. She had received a smile from him. And in that brief, simple exchange, she knew that the world was a little brighter than she had imagined. The smile Officer James gave Emily lasted only a few seconds, but to Emily, it felt like a lifetime. It was a moment she would carry with her forever, like a small, precious gem she could hold in her heart whenever the world felt heavy. As her mother gently wheeled her away from the guard, Emily couldn't stop smiling. Her cheeks were flushed with joy, and her heart fluttered with excitement. "Thank you," she whispered, not just to Officer James, but to the world for this unexpected kindness. She felt like she had been given something special, something rare. It wasn't just the smile, it was the feeling that someone had seen her. Really seen her. Her mother, still wiping away tears, leaned down to her daughter's ear. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," she whispered. "You made a real difference today. I don't think you'll ever forget this." Emily nodded, still wide-eyed and in awe. The palace was even more stunning up close than she could have ever imagined. The large stone walls, the towering columns, and the sparkling windows all seemed to glow with history. But despite the beauty surrounding her, it was the moment with Officer James that filled her heart the most. As they moved deeper into the palace grounds, Emily couldn't help but glance back at the spot where she had stood, where the guard had smiled at her. She wondered if he was still there, standing so still, looking as though he had never moved. She could feel a warmth inside her, a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in a long time. The constant battles of her illness seemed far away, if only for a moment. She wasn't just a sick little girl today. She was someone who had shared a connection with the royal guard, someone who had been given a small but meaningful gift. Her mother noticed the shift in Emily's demeanor. "How do you feel, sweetie?" she asked, her voice gentle and full of love. "I feel happy," Emily replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like I can do anything." Her words were simple, but they were powerful. They carried the weight of all the challenges she had faced in her young life and all the hope she still held in her heart. As they continued their walk through the palace, Emily couldn't stop thinking about Officer James. She had always admired the guards, their unwavering strength and discipline, but now she saw them differently. They weren't just statues, standing silently and rigidly. They were people, too, with hearts that could be touched by kindness, just like anyone else. She thought about the way he had smiled at her. It wasn't a grand gesture or a show of power. It was simple, human, and it had made all the difference. Meanwhile, Officer James stood still, his face once again a mask of calm and discipline. But inside, he was different. The smile he had given Emily had changed something in him. He had been a royal guard for years, and in that time, he had seen hundreds of tourists, soldiers, and dignitaries pass through the palace gates. But none had affected him the way Emily had. Her courage, her innocence, and her unwavering belief in kindness had stirred something inside him. He wasn't sure why, but he felt that this moment, this simple interaction, had been more important than any other in his career. As he stood there, he replayed the moment over and over in his mind. He had broken protocol, something he had never even considered before. But as soon as he had smiled at Emily, he realized that it had been the right thing to do. He wasn't just a guard in that moment, he was a human being, capable of showing compassion and warmth. It had been a small act, but it felt powerful, more powerful than any command or rule he had followed for years. His fellow guards stood around him, their faces as unreadable as ever, but Officer James couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had done something more than follow orders. He had made a real impact on someone's life, even if it was just for a moment. And that was something worth remembering. As the afternoon went on, Emily and her mother were given a grand tour of the palace. They were shown rooms filled with portraits, tapestries, and priceless artifacts. But Emily's mind kept drifting back to the courtyard, to the guard who had broken protocol just for her. She felt like she had been part of something bigger than herself, something that went beyond her illness, her hospital visits, and the treatments she had endured. Later that day, Emily's mother took her aside as they wandered through the garden. "You know, sweetheart, that guard didn't just smile at you because he had to," her mother said softly. "He smiled at you because he saw you. And that's a gift, something you'll always carry with you." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with understanding. "I know, Mom. I feel like everything is going to be okay." It wasn't just a moment of happiness, it was a moment of healing. That small, simple act of kindness had made her feel stronger, braver. It was like a spark had been lit inside her, a spark that had pushed aside the darkness of her illness, if only for a little while. As they made their way back to the main entrance of the palace, Emily's mother smiled at her daughter, her heart swelling with love. "I'm so proud of you, Emily. You've taught me something today," she said. "What's that, Mom?" Emily asked, her voice soft but full of curiosity. "You've reminded me that kindness is everything. In the face of all the pain and hardship, it's kindness that keeps us going. It's the little moments like this that make life worth living." Her mother's voice trembled slightly, but there was strength in her words. Emily smiled back, feeling a warmth inside her heart. The day had been everything she had hoped for and more. It was a day of new memories, a day of kindness, and a day of connection. She didn't know how much time she had left, but in that moment, she felt like she had all the time in the world. And as they left the palace grounds, Emily held onto that feeling. She would carry it with her every day, through the good times and the tough times. No matter what happened, she knew that kindness, even in its simplest form, could make all the difference. It was a lesson she would never forget. For Officer James, the smile he had given Emily would stay with him as well. It wasn't just a smile, it was a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness could change someone's life. And in a world full of rules and protocols, it was moments like these that truly mattered. That day, the smiles exchanged between Emily and Officer James became more than just a fleeting memory. They became a symbol of hope, of the power of kindness, and of the unexpected connections that could change the world. As Emily and her mother slowly left the palace grounds, their hearts were full. The day had unfolded in a way that neither of them had ever imagined. For Emily, it wasn't just about visiting a royal palace, it was about the connection she had made with Officer James. The smile he had given her was more than a friendly gesture. It had made her feel seen, heard, and important, something she didn't always feel in the midst of her struggle with cancer. They were on their way to the car now, and Emily couldn't stop talking about the day's events. Her eyes sparkled as she recounted the parts of the tour that had amazed her: the grand rooms, the beautiful artwork, and the spectacular gardens. But as much as she appreciated all the beauty surrounding her, the most special memory was the one with Officer James. Her mother, who had been quietly listening to Emily's excitement, smiled to herself. She had watched her daughter throughout the day, and she could see the change in her. Emily had been a brave girl for so long, facing the hardest battles with strength and resilience. But today, something else had been added to that strength: hope. The small act of kindness from Officer James had given her a renewed sense of joy, a sense of connection to something greater than herself. Her mother knew that this moment would stay with her forever. As they settled into the car, Emily leaned back against the seat, a peaceful smile on her face. She felt like she had received something precious, something that could never be taken away. She had always known that her illness was a part of her life, but today had been a reminder that there were still beautiful, unexpected moments to experience. Back at the palace, Officer James stood at his post once more, his face once again impassive, as though nothing had changed. But inside, he was different. The smile he had shared with Emily had touched him in a way he didn't quite understand. He had been a royal guard for many years, trained to remain stoic and emotionless, to follow the rules without question. But today, he had broken protocol not because he had to, but because he had wanted to. It had been a simple act, yet it had filled him with a warmth he had never expected. As he stood there, looking out at the courtyard, his thoughts kept returning to Emily. He hadn't known what to expect when she had approached him, but the moment their eyes met, he felt something shift within him. It wasn't just the smile he had given her, it was the feeling that he had connected with her, that he had made a difference in her day. For someone whose job was to remain an unmoving presence, he had realized just how much impact even the smallest gesture could have. Later that evening, as Officer James sat in the small break room with his fellow guards, he couldn't stop thinking about the girl. One of the guards, a man named Thomas, noticed that James seemed distracted. "James, you all right?" Thomas asked, his voice low. James looked up, startled. He hadn't even realized how lost in thought he had become. "Yeah, just thinking about something," he replied, his voice quiet. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "What's on your mind?" James hesitated for a moment. He wasn't sure how to explain the way he felt. "I met a little girl today," he said softly. "She had cancer. She asked me to smile for her. And I did." He paused, trying to find the right words. It felt like the right thing to do. It wasn't just a smile, it was more than that. Thomas stared at him for a moment, and then nodded slowly. "I get it. It's funny how sometimes, even in this job, we forget about the little things. A smile, a kind word, they go a long way." James smiled slightly, the weight of his actions still settling in his chest. "Yeah. It's strange, isn't it? How something so small can mean so much." The conversation drifted off, but James couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in him. He had followed the rules for so long, living his life with the precision of a machine, and for the first time, he realized how important it was to connect with others. That simple moment with Emily had made him feel more human than he had in a long time. Meanwhile, Emily's story was spreading beyond the palace gates. The charity that had granted her wish to visit the palace had received word of the beautiful exchange between her and Officer James. Emily's mother, overwhelmed with gratitude, shared her story with the charity organizers, who were touched by the warmth and kindness that had been shown to Emily that day. The story quickly made its way to the local news. The headline read, "Royal Guard breaks protocol for a little girl with cancer," the moment that touched hearts everywhere. The article shared how Officer James had smiled at Emily, despite the strict rules he was required to follow, and how that simple act of kindness had made a profound impact on the young girl's life. The story spread quickly across social media, with people from all over the world commenting on the power of such a small, yet meaningful, gesture. Emily's bravery in the face of her illness had inspired so many, but it was Officer James' smile that had touched people's hearts. People praised him for breaking protocol to make a difference, and many shared stories of their own encounters with kindness, large and small. For Emily, the ripple effect of that moment was just beginning. The outpouring of support and love from strangers, inspired by her story and Officer James' gesture, filled her heart with hope. She received letters and messages from people all around the world, many sharing their own experiences and offering words of encouragement. Emily had always known that kindness could make a difference, but now, she saw it in action on a scale she had never imagined. The world was responding, not just to her story, but to the message of hope and connection it carried. As the weeks went by, Emily's strength continued to grow. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't alone. The kindness she had experienced that day had planted a seed of hope that would stay with her for the rest of her life. She had made a connection with someone who had cared enough to smile at her, and that small act had brought light into her world. And for Officer James, the ripple effect of that moment lingered in his heart. He realized that sometimes, the rules didn't matter as much as the human connection. The smile he had shared with Emily was more than just a gesture. It was a reminder that kindness had the power to change lives. It was a lesson he would carry with him, not just as a royal guard, but as a person. A lesson that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can have the biggest impact. The story of the little girl and the royal guard would continue to inspire people for years to come, a reminder that kindness and compassion can make all the difference in the world. The ripple effect of that one smile was far-reaching, touching hearts and changing lives in ways no one could have predicted. And for Emily, it was the beginning of a journey filled with hope, strength, and the belief that kindness was the greatest gift of all. Weeks passed after Emily's unforgettable visit to the palace, but the impact of that day remained with her, like a light that continued to shine in her heart. As she sat by the window in her room one afternoon, looking out at the garden below, her thoughts drifted back to Officer James and the smile he had given her. The more she thought about it, the more she realized just how much that small gesture had changed her. When Emily was first diagnosed with cancer, she had felt overwhelmed. The doctor's visits, the treatments, the uncertainty of what each day might bring. It was hard to imagine a world beyond the hospital walls. For months, her life had been defined by needles, hospital gowns, and endless tests. Her world felt small, confined to the sterile rooms and the whirring machines that kept track of her health. It was easy to feel forgotten, as though she was just another patient in a long line of people waiting for something good to happen. But that day at the palace had changed everything. It wasn't just the chance to meet the royal family or tour the Grand Palace. It was the moment when Officer James had smiled at her. That smile had been a reminder that no matter how tough things got, she could still find hope. It reminded her that even in the most difficult of times, kindness could shine through, and it could come from the most unexpected places. As Emily thought about that smile, she felt stronger. She knew that she wasn't alone in her journey, and that feeling of connection had brought her a new sense of courage. She had learned to hold onto that feeling whenever she felt down, whenever the weight of her illness seemed too much to bear. The smile, that one small moment of human kindness, had given her a strength that she hadn't realized she had before. Months passed, and Emily continued her treatments, but something had shifted inside her. She no longer felt defeated by her illness. Instead, she felt empowered. She had been given a gift, something far more valuable than any material possession. The gift of connection. The gift of kindness. And that gift was something that no doctor could prescribe. It was something that only the heart could give. Her mother noticed the change too. She had watched Emily struggle with her diagnosis for so long, and she had seen her battle with feelings of fear and sadness. But now, there was something different in her daughter's eyes. There was a spark of fire that hadn't been there before. It was as if the smile from Officer James had reignited something deep within Emily's soul. One afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, Emily turned to her mother with a bright smile. "Mom, I've been thinking," she said, her voice full of excitement. "I want to do something for other kids who are going through what I've been through." Her mother raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you mean?" "I want to start a project," Emily explained. "I want to collect letters, pictures, and stories from people who have gone through something hard like cancer or anything else, and I want to give them to kids who are in the hospital, so they know they're not alone. I want to show them that there's always hope, just like that smile Officer James gave me." Her mother's eyes welled with tears. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected her daughter, who had faced so much pain, to think about helping others. But that was the magic of kindness. It was contagious. And Emily had felt it deeply. "I think that's a wonderful idea, sweetheart," her mother said, her voice filled with pride. "You've learned so much through your own journey, and now you want to share that with others. That's beautiful." And so, Emily's project was born. She called it the Smile Project, inspired by the very smile that had changed her life. She began collecting letters, drawings, and messages of hope, reaching out to people all over the world. She wanted to remind others who were struggling that they were not alone, just as Officer James had reminded her on that unforgettable day. As Emily worked on her project, she found herself growing stronger in ways she never expected. She realized that helping others wasn't just about giving, it was about healing. The more she shared her story and heard others' stories, the more she felt like she was part of something bigger than herself. The project became a way for her to channel her energy into something positive, something that could make a difference in the lives of others. Meanwhile, Officer James had continued his work as a Royal Guard, his life moving forward in its usual routine. But every now and then, he found himself thinking about that little girl. He remembered the look in her eyes when she asked him to smile, and he couldn't help but wonder what had happened to her. Had the smile he gave her made a difference? He hoped so. He often told himself that it was just a small thing, just a smile. But deep down, he knew it had been more. One day, while on duty, Officer James was handed a letter. It was from a charity he had never heard of before, and as he opened it, he saw that it was addressed to him personally. The letter thanked him for his kindness to a little girl named Emily, and it explained how his simple smile had inspired her to start her own project. The letter went on to describe how Emily was collecting messages of hope and sending them to other children in the hospital, and how the Smile Project had already touched the lives of many. James sat quietly for a moment, his hands trembling as he read the letter. He had no idea that his small act of kindness had turned into something so much bigger than he could have imagined. He had simply smiled, but in doing so, he had given Emily something far more precious than he could have known: a sense of hope, a sense of belonging, and the courage to face the future with strength. The letter ended with a simple message: "Thank you for showing Emily that kindness is the most powerful gift of all. You changed her life, and you changed mine." Officer James folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his pocket. He stood straighter, a sense of pride filling him. The rules and discipline of his job still mattered, of course, but that moment with Emily had taught him something deeper. It wasn't just about standing still and remaining silent, it was about making a difference in someone's life, even if it was in the smallest way. Sometimes, it only took a smile. Back at home, Emily continued to work on her project, her days filled with the joy of helping others. She had become a beacon of hope for so many, and through her efforts, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. She was no longer just a sick girl in a hospital room, she was a symbol of strength, courage, and the power of kindness. As the months passed, Emily's health improved. The cancer treatments were taking effect, and the doctors were hopeful. But no matter what the future held, Emily knew one thing for certain: the smile from Officer James had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. It had given her hope when she needed it most, and it had reminded her that no matter what struggles she faced, kindness would always be there to guide her. That smile had not only changed Emily's life, it had set off a chain of kindness that would ripple through the lives of others for years to come. And for Emily, it was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was always light to be found.